Oh, hello there. Yes, another morning. Another cold morning. Pussycat is out. Brave pussycat. I'm indoors with the heating. It's cold. Anyway, today, I want to talk about the shock horror headlines in places like the Daily Mail about the rise of something for nothing Britain, you gits out there, costing us all money. With the government on the ropes, it's not really surprising that we're going to have a lot of distraction from the right-wing press because they can't actually report about tax affairs or loans or anything else, really, can they? So we have a report from Civitas, another educational charity. I wonder how they are linked to the IEA, for example. Gosh, they're in the same building, 55 Tufton Street. Who'd have thought it? Completely independent, same building, offshoot of. Yes, D-Smog says that their funding's a little bit out of date, I think was the most polite phrase they used. Anyway, very odd report, which, unlike the stuff you're going to read in the papers, the irony of the Daily Mail saying to its readers that you lot are gits because us rich people are paying for you will be lost, I think, in most of the prose in the Daily Mail. But if you actually look at the report, it's slightly odd. It uses ONS, Office of National Statistics, figures, granted, but it kind of lumps in quite a few things together to make a case. I'm going to leave some quotes at the end of this video. I don't really want to put up a lot of stuff. For the most part, it kind of accepts that there's a kind of redistributive nature of the tax system in this country, which you kind of expect. You would kind of expect that the rich pay more in tax because realistically they get more out of the system. I don't think anyone realistically would argue that that shouldn't be the case. Whenever in this country in the past we've tried to do other things, I'm thinking of the poll tax, it tends to lead to problems, and people rightly get miffed with the idea that someone living in a 6-bedroom mansion should pay the same amount of council tax as somebody living in a 1-bedroom flat. I think most people might go on a riot, for example, and get rid of the Prime Minister if they try and bring something like that in. But this is interesting because, they will nudge these kind of things forward with this notion that the poor burden on rich people is just getting too excessive. But what Civitas have done, effectively, have suggested that there is a burden on the rich supporting the poor. And they've done this by lumping in the benefits in kind with the notion of education and health. So, to a certain extent, you might say that education, health, and, street lighting are benefits in kind. But they're also paid for by people out of taxation, generically. A rich person who is involved in a road traffic accident will end up going to an A&E department in the NHS. They are users of those services anyway. Childless couples are net contributors to the education system because they don't have children, no matter what percentile of the economic groupings they're in society. People who are young, fit and healthy pay for people that are older in the NHS. That's a kind of generational agreement that we have. But if you actually sort of think about what they're trying to say here, what they're really trying to say here is that effectively the rich shouldn't pay as much tax because it's unfair on that individualised level, yes? And yet the figures they actually do bring out suggest strongly that effectively as a percentage of income, things like council tax and VAT, which are huge for people at the bottom of the pile, are effectively negligible for people at the top. So actually reading the report, you would tend to sort of think that the tax system we have now is sort of reasonably okay. I just want to show you in particular one of the graphs they've used, and if you look at some of the spikes on this graph, like the initial one under Margaret Thatcher in the early 80s, it tells you that there's a recession. So in other words, people effectively were unemployed and we needed to pay for them. Thank you, North Sea Oil, etc. Then if you look at the 90s recession, which was quite a long and a prolonged, steep one. Under Major, you get the same line. The Brown administration. Oh, look, there's a steep line. I wonder what that could be, financial crash. Yeah? And yet, if you look at Johnson, there's this enormously straight up line. Yeah? Now, what is that? Well, Civitas say effectively that wasn't COVID. They kind of really muddy the figures there in the sense that they just fudge them and kind of go, well, we're just going to ignore COVID as a thing, but just look at the numbers. It's a bit odd, like I say. So they arrive at their figures, their shock horror figures of the highest level ever, effectively by massaging the numbers realistically. And if you do a little bit of digging, you can find that we've been here before. The Daily Mail will produce these kind of headlines every 5 years once everyone's forgotten about the last report that came out. But one has to say to oneself, what exactly is this trying to prove? Yeah? Trying to prove... I mean, are we just going to go into yet another benefit scroungers few years? Yeah? Possibly. Yeah, let's have a go at the disabled. Let's have a go at them because, they're gits. Won't have a go at pensioners. I mean, oddly enough, this is one of the things that Civitas do. They actually include pensioners in this who obviously don't pay income tax. So that's going to distort the figures, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot to unpick here if you can be really bothered with it. And again, I'll leave a link to it if you particularly want to read it. But realistically, it's at best iffy, because I know how to look at things and I can actually read. Not that, the Daily Mail and the Daily Telegraph and the Express will report it that way, of course, because they just rely on you to accept that this totally independent 55 Tufton Street crew are simply telling it like it is. Anyway, I better go and try and rescue my pussycat, lest he become frozen to the spot. And I'll wish you a warm day. Enjoy.